If you have children or you have ever been around a toddler, then you know how this goes because basically what they do is they find a movie that they absolutely love to watch and then they start watching it on repeat over and over and over again, almost to the point where you're thinking, aren't you sick of this yet? Because we start hearing those same, tunes and we get tired of it as adults. But there's a reason why children do this when they're little and they're developing. And I actually even did it, as a young adult because it gives you this sense of peace and security to know exactly how the story is going to end, that there's not going to be any type of surprises, right? Because it's like watching it over and over again, it brings a predictability. And that's what brings comfort. But here's the issue, it then creates a false illusion of our world, of our reality. I've been thinking here lately about this concept and relating it back to scripture because there's a deep spiritual rest that comes from surrendering to the one who already knows the end from the beginning. And without truly knowing him, then we as adults, like we fall into this trap of illusion by our own flesh, by our own ego. Because it's like we also, right? It never ends. Like we like routine because it's comfortable. Um, we like that form of control. But if we're being honest and really looking at scripture, then it's like building a house on shifting sand because we don't truly know what tomorrow's going to hold. It's like we build these fortresses, like these walls, okay, to put around our hearts. We build them out of our bank accounts, maybe our 401k or retirement or a career title, like I did in the past, or a routine, a meticulously planned schedule. And it's where we start to build that false security because it makes us feel a fake peace and security, a fake peace, false peace. And that's what the world offers us. I mean, they offer us, right, that we have basically a temporary truce with our circumstances. But only Messiah actually offers supernatural peace. It only comes from him because without him, the moment that a crisis hits, okay, whether it's with our bank account, with our job, with our family, with our spouse, whatever, then that illusion completely opens up and then it leaves us spiritually bankrupt. So that's one of the things I had to be honest with myself, right, from experience and say, what is my security blanket? Because if everything that I worked for was stripped away tomorrow, if I didn't have a house, if I didn't have a bank account, if I didn't have a work routine, who would I be? And if the thought of losing control of any of those things produces panic in you, then please reflect and look, could we be trusting this illusion, our flesh, our ego, and the things that make our ego safe? Could we be trusting in that more than our creator? Because you see, Abba Yah, he doesn't operate on just the macro scale of the whole world. I mean, he's also in our everyday lives on the little things. He knows every single hair on our head, and he cares so much about us and the details of our life that he wants to give us a cushion, before a major life trial even hits if we're seeking him. If we're seeking him, because I remember back in 2008, there was a market crash, basically on energy and oil. And thankfully, my husband and I, we were prepared spiritually ahead of that. We were warned, okay? And so we heeded to that warning. And even to this day, I give God all the glory for that because he was protecting us by building an ark for us to where we were basically in a little bubble during that time. And it happened again in 2021 when the whole world shut down. And here we were, it really didn't affect our lives very much because that was only by listening to that still small voice inside of us and saying, what do you want for my life? What would please you? It reminds me of John 14:29 because it says there that I have told you now before it happens so that when it does happen, you will believe. I mean, I had already believed, but Yah has been showing me all along, right? I'm with you. I've got you. This isn't going to cause you any anxiety because you're in me and I'm in you. And that's what he really just wants for us to do. He wants us to cast all of our cares on him. And then that's when we can receive a peace that defies logic, that defies the flesh. A lot of people in carnality, they can't hear this. They don't understand it because it's faith, it's spiritual. But it says right there in Philippians 4, verse 6 and 7, be careful for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving. Let your requests be made known unto God. And the peace of God, that supernatural peace, right? That peace of God, which passeth all understanding, shall keep your hearts and minds through Messiah. It's like this world, it defines peace basically when you don't have any trouble going on in your life, when you're completely comfortable. But that's a counterfeit, because true biblical peace doesn't mean that you're not going to have a storm in your life from time to time. In fact, Jeremiah 6:14 actually warns us about these false prophets, and they say peace, peace when there is no peace. It kind of reminds me of a stock market right before a crash, where it looks all great, and then all of a sudden when the bottom falls out, they're like, "What? We didn't know." It was all false. It was just an optical illusion. And that's exactly what a life without salvation looks like. It's like you can try to buy comfort and you can try to, watch something over, buy a routine or have this predictability, right? You can try to arrange your own predictability, but we can't manufacture salvation because if we don't have him, then it's like we're sleeping on a volcano. And at any moment, it could just totally erupt. At our core, what we all want in this world is security and a happy ending. It actually reminds me of my mother-in-law because she watches, I just recently found this out that she watches the ending of a movie before she actually decides to watch the whole movie. And it makes me think that this is really kind of an amazing revelation we can gain from this because we can actually all do that. We can know how things play out in our lives if we just go to him in belief and faith and seek him because it even says in Amos 3:7 that he will warn us ahead of time. And, the hardest part of the whole journey, okay, is just navigating the middle chapters, right? Because the middle chapters in the book are where all the trials live. It's where the mess of chastening happens. And we can't get stuck in those middle chapters of our life testimony. We have to grow spiritually from all these different hardships that we go through. That's the whole point. And whatever these middle chapters look like for us, whether it's a chapter on struggling in your marriage or a health crisis or a chapter on financial stress, maybe that chapter has all of it in there together. Maybe you went through a health crisis and then because of that you had a financial stress and because of that now you're struggling in your marriage. But it's like we have to ask ourselves, are we trying to rewrite those chapters for ourselves? Or are we handing those chapters and the pen and those pages over to the creator of the book? Because I used to be one of those people that just wanted to skip over those chapters instead of asking Abiyah to show me what I was learning from that process of pain, you know? If we just mentally surrender all of that to him. And that's all he really asks us to do is just to have faith in him, to trust him, right? And it's part of the pruning process, and that helps refine our faith. It helps produce, like it says in James, perseverance. But, if you're struggling with anxiety over the unknown in that chapter of your life right now, please call out to him, start seeking him because he is mighty to show you his presence in the storm. And that's what is so amazing to me is yes, you may not know the exact outcome of how something turns out, but having that faith that it's going to end well because I can't reiterate enough that salvation is the only lens that brings the entire picture of why we suffer into focus. It basically takes us out of the false illusion and it shows us how to overcome in him, and take Asaph, for example. Ah, he was, he basically wrote some of the Psalms, okay? He was a worship leader, he was a prophet, and he was appointed by King David to lead praise and worship in the house of the Lord, okay? And he was brutally honest in these conversations in the Psalms. He was brutally honest with God. And he was a faithful believer, but guess what? He struggled with anxiety. He questioned the purpose of why he was suffering. And he had to learn how to see past his flesh, past his own ego through the lens of salvation, through God's presence. And that testimony is supposed to be us. Because when we go through all of this wrestling, all these different chapters, the whole goal is to overcome. It's to, it reminds me of that song by AJR, it's can we skip to the good part? you know, because we can rest finally, because then we know the final page of the book. Because in Revelation 21:4, he promises us that God then will wipe away all of our tears. So, all those chapters that caused us pain, there's not going to be any more death, no more crying, and all the former things are going to pass away, and it'll be a new season, And right there, that's our proof that our current season of testing, the messy middle chapters, it's not for nothing. It's all working for his glory and for his perfect purpose in our lives.